welcome to Hard Claim with Viva La Sam. I'm Sam. This is a show where we talk to people who play Blood on the Clocktower and get their player perspective of the game. Joining us this week is Jen. Jen, thank you for joining.
No problem.
All right. Well, I asked you what script would you like to have pulled up. You chose Sex and Violets, so I sent out some characters. You have, of course, drawn the Oracle token. That means you wouldn't have gotten information on the first night, but what would you like to hard claim as?
Today I'm going to hard claim as the Snake Charmer.
Oh, hard claiming a Snake Charmer. So what's the thought process there?
In my thought process, I think I just kind of randomly choose whether I'm going to go straight out and be honest with everyone, or if I'm going to do something a little bit chaotic. I think the chaos plays, as long as you can explain what your thought process is, tend to buy you trust. In this case, I think Snake Charmer is not something that is immediately taken off the board depending on the player. I think people know that some players will play it a little bit more cautiously and some players will play it a little bit more chaotically. And that some people will just claim it as an evil character, so that I may be seen as a good frame job. So I may last a couple turns, and then I can actually pivot and start telling the truth. So I might get a little bit further than just saying Oracle and then having be killed right away. But it just depends on the day. I think it's just gonna depend on what I'm feeling and who I'm playing with and what the board looks like.
That didn't sound too differently from how I play. Sometimes I just go the honest route. Sometimes I'm lie with a reason. Yeah, cool. Well, so how did you first discover Blow on a Clocktower?
So I actually am a big fan of Survivor and Big Brother and a lot of reality style social deception games and deduction games, mostly deception, I think. And was playing Mafia with people that were fans of the same thing, and friend of mine and ours, I think, introduced me to this group. Becky, maybe you'll have her on for a future discussion about
I
the
plan
game.
to, yeah.
Yeah. She introduced me to the group, and I actually kind of jumped into the deep end and did some crazy homebrew stuff. But I think that everyone kind of has their own path into it, and that's kind of how I fell into it. But yeah, I think the social aspect of the game is really what drew me in.
Cool, yeah. And I want to ask you later more about the television shows you like, because I think it's an interesting topic to dive into, because I don't think you're the only one. And about how long ago was that?
That was, I think that our group had started playing for quite some time before I got in, but it was still fairly early on during the pandemic. So I would say probably mid 2020, later 2020. So it's been a good 4 years, I would say.
Awesome. Let me get a cough out real quick. Excuse me. We'll cut that out. All right. Yeah, so do you remember what your first games were like when you were playing them? Like, what was it like being a new player trying to sort through everything?
Yeah, so I would say, luckily, the group that we are a part of, and a lot of groups that like you can find out there, I think that there's resources to really look for them. We're very friendly and helpful. I think that this game is really a unique game in which hopefully you are willing to lie to each other, but that you are honest with each other about how the game is played. And I think that is similar to some other scenarios, like I was talking about earlier, like TV shows. Like there should be a social contract of how you're playing, like a game, to an extent. And maybe some people have different social contracts, but I think you find a good group that you all agree on the social contract, and hopefully uphold that social contract. And our group, and I think a lot of good groups out there, tend to draw a line at lying about how the game is played and the rules. So you definitely always want to be on the same page about that. So my first experiences were really good about that. Like, being open to asking questions and being open to like uh, being inviting and hopefully explaining the inside jokes and things like that. You don't always get everyone's inside jokes right away, but you want to be able to like foster that relationship, I think, with new players.
Is there a point where you would say that you kind of realized you were hooked on Blood on the Clock Tower?
So very early on, I would say I started looking at the scripts that we were playing, whether it was the base three scripts, because very early on, obviously, even the base three scripts, you have to kind of look and see what's in play, study each of the sets of characters. I personally, again, started in a weird path and was playing lots of homebrew, so like stuff that doesn't even exist in the main core groups. It's not played as often as it used to be, I think, and so there is still like Fall of Rome and a couple other ones that are very popular, but I do think that was kind of more of a big thing when we first started playing. Was there was a lot of experimentation with characters and different types of Marvel DC ones that were like really off the wall. I think even Ben B has his homebrew that he really enjoys.
Yeah.
And I think once I was like trying to figure out how every interaction would work with each other and keeping them secret to myself until I could reveal, like, oh, well, this could be done or this could be done, because now I couldn't do it because I wasn't that character. Um, then I was like, okay, well, now I realize that I really do like the puzzle of the game. And I also started to realize that I enjoyed like picking up on people's social cues, their reads, and it's not as simple as even just like one thing for everyone. Like each individual person, you kind of can get a feel for, and I think it depends on the person how well you can do it, person to person, and each individual person may have better reads than others. And it's no fault of anybody. And sometimes you just have a bad read too. Like I could have a really good read on a person, and then just one game, I'm completely off. So once you realize that you enjoy all the aspects of whether it's the puzzle or the social aspects, then I think it's just kind of it hooks you, I think.
So what is a homebrew, and what kind of homebrews did you do when you were starting out?
So a homebrew is generally, and there is sometimes a mix, but most times it is a completely from scratch mixture of a script where each character is individually written, completely separate of the base characters that we know from Blood on the Clocktower. Sometimes they will use base characters and mix them in with completely made up characters too. But a lot of them are like themed. Very early on, there was a lot of theming based on like favorite TV shows and things like that. Like I said, I think the very first one that I played was a was it Marvel or DC? It was either a Marvel or a DC. I think it was Marvel, and I was Luke Cage, I want to say. And if there was like an Infinity Gauntlet in it, I don't remember. It's been so long, but I've definitely played quite a few. I mean, there was some as creative as like there was the storyteller had to keep track of all the whispers because the characters all interacted with whisper somehow, and so there was like this big web, and some of the characters could move with like the whisper strings, and that would affect what would happen in the night based on where the whisper strings were. And that was like a huge, like very complex one. And it depends on how much time is put in. But I do think that when you're looking at those things, that sometimes the interactions can be so hard that it's harder for people to pick up on. Whereas I think that what Blood on the Clocktower does so well with the base scripts is that those are fairly like when you start with Trouble Brewing and Sex and Violets, Trouble Brewing in particular, like you can almost teach that to anybody. It may take a little bit of practice, but I think after a few weeks, you'd probably play a couple games, you probably are going to start to pick up and be okay. I do think that the more complex that you get, the harder it gets. And I think that even when you start looking at custom scripts, that they are still not as complex as like changing the whole format of the game, which I do think that some of the newer characters that we're getting into are starting to try to do like some like particularly game shifting mechanics, but
Mhm.
they're not so hard that I think that they would be too difficult to learn, which I think some homebrews do that. They kind of go overboard to the point that I think that new players may not be able to kind of grasp the concept.
Do you have an idea of how much you've played altogether? I know most people really aren't keeping track, but I don't know if you have an idea of that or not.
I if I had to guesstimate, I'd probably say over 1,000 games. I think when we were at the last DC convention, that Guami said alone, he and I had played over 500 or 600 games, just me and him. And I know I've definitely played not with Guami quite a few times too. So
I've seen
I would
him. I've seen him a few different times point to somebody and be like, "This is our 100th game together." So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I would say, and I think we were looking. He was looking at the numbers. I would say that between the group, that I'm up there on the one of the higher end players of played with him. I think maybe Lynn is topped me for amount of games for sure with him, but I would say over 1,000 if I had to guesstimate.
How much would you say you've played online versus in person?
I would say 98% online versus 2% in person. I mean, my only in-person experiences were the two Clocktower Con conventions in DC, and I'm hopefully going to try to start participating in. There's a Boston area group up here.
Mm-hmm.
I've met some of the people that went to Clocktower Con. It's a matter of timing always, with work and everything. I think everyone can relate to that, trying to get to, the physical in-person place to play. But yeah.
What are your thoughts on playing online versus in person? Like, what was that transition like going to an in person game after playing so much online?
I do think it's a very I don't think it's very different. I do think it is different. I do think that there's benefits and drawbacks of both. I think that uh, that it's they're both fun in their own ways, and I think that you have a different experience in both settings. Um, and I think that I would like to have more in person play just for that experience of being able to um, enjoy the aspects that you don't get to enjoy on the computer. I think a lot of people online like to, do intensive note taking, and I've actually kind of strayed away from that myself. I tend to kind of just wing it a lot of times. I may jot down a couple things here or there or type some stuff, down. But I think the in-person experience doesn't allow for that, and there are a lot of people who will still like bring a little tiny notebook with them or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But I do think that while there is like a strategic element to the game, I think a lot of it in my mind, you have to go with gut feelings and instincts and social reads. And I think that when you are really relying on that written information, that you start to not look at the things that are natural for us to see, whether that be in person or online. So the facial cues, the thing, the quiver in the voice, the small things that you may pick up on if you are just focusing on what somebody says, are not being focused on because you're trying to take notes. And
Yeah.
you may just remember whatever you thought you needed to write down without writing it down if you just gave yourself the opportunity to do that. So I think um, that in person gives you that opportunity to have that practice because you don't have the ability to type it down on a computer or look away for a second and write something down on a piece of paper or whatever the case may be. Although on the other hand, then you can pretend like you're doing that when you're evil, so it looks like you're so involved in trying to solve the game,
Yeah.
when you're really not doing that. So it's kind of both ends of the spectrum, I think.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I know a lot of people do want to write stuff down. Yeah, and everybody has their own kind of way of doing it. But I know for me, writing things down, I do like writing a few things down. But if I do it too much, then I feel like I'm not really playing the game. I'm just tracking stuff, and yeah. So how often do you play right now? Would you say?
So I would say at least for playing, I at least play um 3 days a week. 2 days solid, 3 days if I can make the third day, and then I sometimes will storytell on a fourth day, um, but definitely 2 days solid playing at least.
All right. Do you remember what your do you remember that progression? You know, I feel like a lot of players have a progression from you're brand new to the game, you're trying to work everything out, and you kind of become an intermediate player where you kind of know, the basic interactions, and then eventually you get to an experienced player where you don't need to look at your trouble brewing script, you just kind of know what everything does. Do you have any thoughts on like that progression from going beginner to intermediate to expert, or not expert but experienced?
Yeah, I don't think honestly I don't know if there's any experts in this game. I think it's all a learning
Right.
process. And the minute you think you've got a hold on something, so you get introduced to a new group of players, and it's completely different.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's funny. I think that um, every time I get introduced to a new group, I think everyone thinks that they're going to get a good read on me, and then they never do. And then once they think they have a handle on me, I switch things up. And I think that's kind of the way that I like to see other players too. Is that I'm never going to assume that I have them pinned, because I know that they're going to change something if I do. But for me, I would say, like I said, I started a little bit weirdly where I was kind of jumping in with both feet. So I would say I did have to study the scripts a little bit more at the beginning. So I'd say for the first like month or so, I did study the scripts a little bit more. So I would say I would still like kind of a beginner. I would say, no, if you don't have social deduction in your background, like you haven't played a mafia or werewolf, or something that has that kind of same aspect, that it probably would be longer. But for me, I would say about a month to be comfortable where I didn't have to like study everything super closely. And then I would just do a brief overview of like characters of the script. And if I didn't know a character, I maybe would read it a little bit more closely. Um, and I would say for the first like 6 months, I would maybe ask a few like clarifying questions about interactions. And then after that, I think it was just kind of after about a year, I would say it was all bets off. I would try things to, just to try them, or do things differently just to kind of throw people off, because again, you can't do everything the same way every single time. Um, and so at that point, I think that's when I was just kind of, especially more recently over the last year, I think I've kind of just thrown everything to the wind, and I play, I play to have fun, but I also, I like winning, but I would much rather have fun. So I may not do everything 100% optimally, but I usually have a reason for why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's a good transition to another question I was going to ask about your previous experience doing any other social deduction games, if any. I know you mentioned Mafia. I don't know if you've ever played any other social deduction games or not. Yeah, what's your background like there?
Yeah, I played Mafia the most, and then I played Ultimate Werewolf, and versions of Werewolf, and I think I played like Secret Hitler like once or twice, not like a lot. Um, eh, None of them really hit as much. I still do play Mafia every once in a while. That group doesn't really meet up as much as it used to, just based on work stuff and life stuff. Um, it's very different. Obviously, I enjoy social deduction games, so I still enjoy it, but it is very frustrating, I think, with those games that once you're dead, you're no longer participating. And when you wait, weeks or months sometimes to play a game, the frustration is very real when you're the first one who dies, and you don't get to play for the rest of the night. I mean, hopefully you've set up a system in which you're playing more than one game. And usually in those groups, there's a social contract that if you die very early, hopefully you don't die very early the next game. But that can make for an interesting scenario, because then that person might be in the mafia the next game, and now you've got like a weird situation where just because you feel bad that they died the first game, they now make it a little bit further. And did they win as the mafia because of that? So those are the kind of games that I've played, and I think that they're fun. I think the mechanics aren't as intriguing. And again, I think that the kind of frustration built in with not being able to play after you die very early is always kind of a pain point for those games. But they're a good, like, quick, fun game for small groups that are a little bit easier to kind of grasp.
So you sit down for a game of Blood on the Clocktower. You haven't drawn your token yet. How are you feeling? What are you thinking before you've even drawn your token?
So I'm always going to feel out the group. If it's a group that I'm comfortable with and I know everyone, then I'm probably just kind of goofing off, having fun. Maybe taking a peek at the script if it's a custom script that I haven't looked at before, just to kind of give it a good whirl. But for me, it's always going to be, even if I know the group, listening for social cues on what's going on with the person, because as much as the game is just a game, there, we're all hopefully, somewhat friendly, if not friends. So knowing what's going on with them is important, but additionally, knowing what's going on with them tells me a little bit about what I need to know for social reads. Uh, Somebody may have had like a rough day, and if I can know that going into the game, it may give me a little bit of a read on whether or not that is affecting what I'm reading, because they may just be having a bad day, not evil. That's maybe why they're more quiet today. And I'm not going to press on somebody just because they're a little bit more quiet today because they had a rough day. Whereas, they're bubbly at the beginning and then all of a sudden they they shut up. Maybe they drew a red token. That's a whole different story. I still may not press on them because it benefits me to know where evil is and maybe not say it right away and see what they do and follow what they're doing. But yeah, I think depending on the group, I may kind of just feel things out, listen. But I also may just ham it up and have fun. Just depends kind of on the day and how I'm feeling. But I do think that listening to the group and kind of seeing what people are doing, what people are saying, especially in a new group, I'm generally kind of quiet, but I do kind of put in a witty 2 cents here or there. But I do listen a lot, and I think that is usually based on my play style, I think.
Cool. When you pull out a character, do you hope it's blue or do you hope it's red?
That's a good question. I don't know that I actually have a preference.
Okay.
I think that I enjoy both. I do really enjoy good. Uh, I guess I would call it chaotic good. So a good character that maybe not a lot of people enjoy as much. So somebody that doesn't have as much to do. So like if I pulled like a butler, for example, like somebody may be like, "Oh, this is boring." I would try to find something fun or some weird play that maybe would be way more beneficial than anybody could think of. It may take me, a couple of days to try to figure out what it is, but I may be able to do something with it. So yeah, I would say uh, useless good characters would probably be what I'm hoping for.
Well, that goes well in my next question, which is what kind of characters do you like to play? So that already kind of gives the hint, but are there other characters you like to play? Are there kinds of characters you prefer to avoid?
I also really like so if I'm going to be drawing a red token, I always would prefer a minion over a demon. I definitely don't think that I do particularly poorly as the demon. I just think that there's a lot of um, pressure that comes with the demon, other than obviously the imp, where you can just kind of pass it off. I think that there's a lot more choices that have to be made, that if they aren't particularly well made, that one turn can completely turn the game around one way or the other. um, but I think that outed evil is something that I I enjoy particularly a lot. even when there is a situation in which people don't want to chat with me, I somehow uh, find my way back into being talked about and why I'm doing things, even if I'm just sitting in a room. I think there's been many a game, and probably people can go find them on your stream or other streams, where people are like, well, why is Jen doing this? Or Jen did this because of this. And maybe it's true and maybe it's not. I'm just doing it because it causes chaos. And I think that those are fun too. But yeah, I would say those, and like I said, um, useless good characters that I can maybe turn into something that is a little bit more fun. That maybe some people don't enjoy as much.
I was definitely going to ask about playing out at Evil and how you felt about that. You already pretty much addressed that. So to also address the other side, how do you feel when somebody else is out at Evil? How do you play that situation?
Well, I particularly like to talk to Out at Evil. I think that it's super beneficial. I think you can get a lot of information from what people are lying about. So there's people that are proponents of not lying is good, which I think is also not particularly helpful. I think that lying is good is beneficial. And if I'm in the other side of that, whether I'm good or evil, it also tells me a lot about what the player's intention is. So if I'm going to see an out and evil player, I'm going to go and uh, talk to them and give them what information that I want to give them, and then see what they do with it. So, in a in a more recent game, there was a vizier, and I gave them, or I actually baited them into. I said that I was the steward who saw them. There was an atheist on the script, and I thought maybe I could see if I could bait them into saying that they were the atheist. And sure enough, they said they were the atheist. And I said, "Well, I was just joking. I'm actually the soldier." And I was the soldier, and the vizier pushed the kill through on me, which again pretty much sold me on them being evil. Unfortunately, not everyone believed that was the case, so it is what it is. But that was a piece of information that I was able to glean from the interaction with the person, and I think that the only way you do that is by having a conversation with the person who is evil and seeing what they do with that information. And if you just ignore that person, then first of all, there's no fun for that person in the game.
Right.
And, also maybe you just assume that, they are evil, and now you don't get any more information about any other evil players. So.
So, thinking about scripts, what kind of scripts do you enjoy? What kind of scripts don't you enjoy, if any? And probably it's best to start with the base scripts. What's your favorite? What's your favorite base 3 script?
I always enjoy Sex and Violets. I think that SNV offers such a variety of different options of things that can be happening uh, in a way that, like, you can puzzle them out for sure, but I think that people underestimate the social reads. Um, I do think that there are some storytellers out there who are overly harsh with madness, but I think there's some storytellers who are also underly harsh with madness. I like when it's the perfect amount, so that there is a vagueness, and then it is based on the social read, because then it makes it more fun. And additionally, then as evil or as good, you can possibly kind of pass yourself as being mad. And that is a fun thing to try to decipher. Additionally, the social change of somebody who maybe got jumped to as a Fangu, or trying to pull a play as a evil, saying that a snake charmer snake charmed you, or all these different things that you can do. Um, pit hags that can switch things, and then just lying that there is a pit hag and that you got changed. There's so many different things that you can make up stories about that could actually happen, that just aren't like feasible on other scripts. I think the other scripts are really great as well. I think TB is a classic. There's so many things that you can do with TB, but I think that SMV takes it to the next level of, like, it is almost impossible to think of every scenario that can happen in S&V. Like it is
Yeah.
legitimately hard to think of everything that can happen. Um, uh, and I used to not like BMR as much, but I've gained an appreciation for it. I think probably just because of some more recent experience. Having played it in person a lot more, I think it has um, made it more fun. I think that some chaotic plays that I've been able to pull off with it have made it more fun. I think also just um, just not taking things so seriously, I think make it a little bit more fun as well. I think for me, there's really not a lot of bad scripts out there. I think the only bad ones are made bad a lot of times by players trying to find ways to like optimize play and then not like take fun into account a lot of times.
Sure.
I do think that there's definitely something to be said about like certain interactions maybe being avoided, but I think that there is mostly um, ways for storytellers to ensure that those things don't happen.
You mentioned madness, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is not a question I wrote down, but I will be writing down for the future. Would you like to expand on how you feel about madness, how you like playing as madness, how you like to use it if you're, a Sarah novice? Yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it depends on what I'm doing at the time. If I'm the Ceranovis or the Harpy, which I had the fun of doing fairly recently, um, you know, eh, I kind of eh, sometimes I will have like a plan in mind, and sometimes I just want to put chaos out there. It depends on the situation. Uh, if I'm using it towards somebody, I'm just hopefully doing something that makes it a little bit more difficult for information to get out there, or um, I'm maybe doing it with a goal in mind. So in particular, I think recently there was a situation where there was a gangster and I was the harpy, and I was like, okay, well, I'm definitely using this because there's, an easy way to basically kill off who I want to kill off. Um, didn't end up working out super well. I think we knew what we needed to do, but it is what it is. Playing as Mad, I think again, it's going to depend on the situation. I may like go fairly hard and like do really well as Mad and just not care if I get killed, or I may be a little bit more loose with it and see, if somebody tries to get me executed when I'm playing well, it is what it is. And then I get to say, okay, well, I was mad. Here's the information. Obviously, I'm not evil because I was made mad. Obviously that's not always the truth. Sometimes you can make yourself mad, but uh, if I'm, good or good and not that important, then I maybe am a little bit more cavalier with my madness. I may be like, oh no, I'm definitely, the Oracle. Yep, for sure, I'm the Oracle. And just kind of chance it to see what happens. But I think it just depends on the situation.
Do you enjoy madness as a mechanic?
Yeah, it's a fun thing to kind of navigate. I think so. I think it's a tool that you can use to communicate what is going on. Uh, that experienced players should hopefully be able to understand is in play. One, two, uh, understand what you're trying to communicate if you are trying to communicate as Mad, in ways that maybe less experienced players aren't able to do. I think you and I had a discussion at one point about like an impossible situation, and I thought of a way to basically stay mad as this and communicate how it would work, which was
Mm-hmm.
fairly humorous. I think it all depends on what you want to do, but you also have the option. It's something that you are told you are made mad as this, and you could just say, nope, I'm not doing that. And then now it's in the storyteller's hands whether or not they will execute. and whether or not that is beneficial to town or not beneficial to town, depending on like whether or not they actually let it go through. So you very well could break madness and then not get executed because of the state of the game at the time. So yeah, when I'm the harpy and I choose my demon and myself, and I think there's a heretic, and we clearly don't play along with the harpy madness, the storyteller's probably not going to execute us. But that is part of the choice that the storyteller has. Yeah, I think it's a great mechanic, and I think it's there is some stirrings in the community that talk about there needs to be a set rule of this is exact, but I don't think that really makes for the game that we all signed up for, which is that there needs to be a discretion based on situation, and not every situation is exactly the same, just like not every human is the same, not every um, you know uh, interaction is the same. Like my conversation with you is not going to be the same as my conversation with somebody else about uh, this game or anything else. So like you have to take those human interactions into account, and the humanness of the interactions into account, and kind of adjust for that. And therefore there is those things that need to be adjusted for in storytelling and in playing, I think.
So you mentioned liking Survivor and social strategy television shows like that. What are other examples of shows that you like that?
Yeah, so Survivor, Big Brother are two big ones, but I mean, there was Devil's Plan recently on Netflix, which was a really great one. There was Squid Games: The Challenge, which was really good. I'm really have been meaning to watch. There is a reality show called The Genius that I haven't gotten a chance to watch. I think it's Korean. I'm not 100% off the top of my head, but it is one that is not readily available and easily watched on a streaming service. So I haven't had the chance to be able to like hook up to stream on my TV. But they're all very um, like complex games, and the social strategy is very high end. Where I think Survivor and Big Brother are kind of on the looser end, and you come up with people to work with, and there is like some social reads and stuff. I do think like Devil's Plan is a better example of like there is a higher level of strategy, and I do think Genius is supposed to be like really really up there too, for like you have to like come up with very very high end strategy, along with being able to read what people's thoughts are, and what they're being two steps ahead, essentially, I think.
There's a number of characters that maybe controversial is not the right word, but maybe a kind of divisive. So I wanted to ask you about a few different characters, see what you thought about them. Since we just talked about sex and violence a bit, how do you feel about Snake Charmer?
I think Snake Charmer is I think it's a fun one. I do think that there is obviously some controversy over like the if you snake charm on the first day thing. I think that's the chance that the snake charmer takes. I also think that again, it's a situation in which it spices up the game a little bit. So, um, do you claim snake charmer out of the gate? And if you do, then are you ready and prepared for if you are going to choose people? If you do choose the demon, are you able to pivot and stay in the game? So like it gives you a multitude of questions to ask yourself, and maybe you change up your playstyle each time. Like I have definitely not claimed snake charmer as the snake charmer and chose people. I have claimed snake charmer as the snake charmer and chose people. I have claimed snake charmer and then chose myself. I have there's every gamut. You can't do the same thing every time, or else it will be expected. So I think it's just going to be dependent on the person. I think it's a good character. I think it's just going to depend on the person, on what their choices are, and I think you have to do different things and try different things, or else again it'll become stale and boring and not fun. So do it all.
So, related question, not specific to Snake Charmer, but it's definitely related. When you're good, do you try to turn evil if you have a chance? We're talking, Mezephiles, Goon, Snake Charmer. Do you try to turn evil, or how do you play that?
Um, so if I'm the goon, I play fairly middle. I don't necessarily like go hard at becoming evil, but I definitely don't play 100% good um, until I know that it is no longer possible to be evil anymore, and then I will go 100% good. So I have definitely gone back and forth as the goon and then died as good and then immediately outed all of my information, and it helped solve the game. However, if I'm still alive, I'm probably going to see which way the game is going, and try to. I'm not going to completely tank good. I'm not going to go out and purposefully like make it hard for good to win, but I'm not going to actively help good either, because it is feasible that I will be changed. Um, and if there's some Zephyles and they come to me and they try to give me a word, I'll probably give it and see what happens. Um, I'm not actively seeking it out. I'm not saying, "Hey, Mazephiles, come give me the word." But I do think that more times than not, if I'm playing in a group that knows me, that I probably would be given the word or tried to be changed. It's not unheard of to be made evil, or be wanted to be on an evil team when I'm in the game.
All right. Well, thinking about some other divisive characters, and we mentioned this, or you mentioned this earlier. How do you feel about Atheist?
Atheist, I think, is fun, dependent on storyteller. I think that the
There's probably no
storyteller,
character that's more like that.
yeah,
That's extremely storyteller dependent.
yeah. I think that the aim of the atheist is to create a puzzle in which it is not easy to figure out within the first 3 to 4 turns. If I can figure the puzzle out within the first 3 to 4 turns, then let's not even have the puzzle. Let's not even bother with it. Now, to put a caveat on that, my good friend Viva La Sam here did do a fish bucket atheist game on a teensy. There is only a few turns in a teensy, so I will adjust for that one specific scenario that probably will never happen again. Um, however, I do think like in a 12-player, atheist game, that your goal should be that you get to final three in an atheist game, and it is still slightly questionable whether or not this is an atheist game, but we may be leaning heavily towards atheist game, and if it is figured out like a turn or two before, then let shenanigans fly, because why not? Like if it's super clear and everyone's figured it out, then you can let the shenanigans fly. But don't let shenanigans fly within the first 2 or 3 turns, because that's the kind of the whole point of the game, is that everyone wants to try to figure things out. So if we are like doing shenanigans, and if I say shenanigans one more time, I think I win a prize. Sam told me about this at the beginning of the recording. So, anyways, yeah, I do think that if you are already doing that stuff at the beginning of the game, then nobody gets to puzzle, and it was just like, you know, especially if like this is again somebody's once a week or once a month fix for the game, like you've basically just wasted their time. And I think that may be the like main gripe, is that if somebody sees atheist on the script, they're afraid that they don't get to actually play a game. So give them a game that they can play for at least most of the game, and then at the end they're like, okay, well, we figured it out. Instead of, yeah, this has been an atheist game the whole time. Why did we waste our time? I think that's probably the complaint that I think I would most attribute to that character, that I have had the opposite experience so many times that I think that, it's just a matter of having those good experiences, and people would probably like the character a little bit more.
I'm generally of the opinion that Atheist games should be rare, even if you're playing a script with Atheist on it. And I feel like that makes it work better. But you also need a script where evil has ways to put doubt, or can plausibly have a way to think that Atheist is in play. That's why I liked Vizier so much for an Atheist script.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How do you feel about Poppy Grower?
Um, I enjoy Poppy Grower, if not again overused. I think the fear or thought of Poppy Grower is good. Um, I've had so many funny experiences as evil with a Poppy Grower in play that it makes it enjoyable. I also think that Poppy Growers are great evil bluff, um, because you know that it's not in play when it's not in play. So it's an easy like pickup if you're a minion. You don't ever have to talk to any of your other evil team, especially if you're not that important of an evil. Um, you just claim Poppy Grower and get going. But then it's also possible that you double claim. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of not overusing it. I think that you know most people would say that evil's generally going to start somewhat at a disadvantage depending on the script and the setup and everything like that. The token draws can definitely lean either way, but I would say not knowing any information makes it a lot harder for evil. So I think it just depends. But I'm also an evil person who 100% has never talked to their evil team for the entire game and made it through to final three. So I don't know. Maybe that's probably why I don't hate Poppy Grower as much as other people.
How do you feel about Heretic?
I've had a shifting opinion on Heretic. I definitely hated it a lot more at the beginning, probably because I've gotten through to the end and almost won, and then thought we were winning, and then it flipped because a Heretic never outed to anybody, and then that was pretty much it. But my most recent experiences have been where we figured out and either won because of it or didn't win but could have if we just did the right thing at the right time. And so I think it's a fun and interesting puzzle. I do think that it's dependent on how the script is written, and I think that's very important to whether or not it is fun. I can understand people's frustration. I think, again, it is a situation in which somebody uh, has a feeling towards the way the game is going, and at the very end it's snatched from them at the last moment. It's like you watched an entire movie, and then at the end of the movie you find out that this was all a dream, and you're like, oh man, I just watched this whole movie and it wasn't even actually a thing. It was just all fake. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, the feeling that people get when they play a Heretic game. They think they've won, and then everything flips. Um, but I think that that's kind of the important thing about being a Heretic and knowing who and when to share that information with.
At the time of recording this, the most recent release script is Shriek, which has Heretic on it. It's a script for Banshee, but Heretic is on it. And I think a lot of people, myself included, have felt that that's probably one of the best uses of Heretic we've seen to date. And I think it's gone a long way into changing people's thoughts and opinions on Heretic and how it can work in a script.
I agree. I think I have played it several times as good, figuring out that we need to ensure that essentially evil wins so that we win. And both things have happened, whether we won because of that or we lost because of that. And I've also played as evil, knowing that there's a Heretic in play. My demon, discussing it with my demon, coming up with plans on how we would kill the demon, and then deciding we'll just let it play out in the final three, and then losing, even though it was a Vortox game, and we purposefully made sure that there was an execution on a dead body as evil to make sure that we did not lose, because we knew that there was a heretic, or we were so positive that there was a heretic. So like I think that this is the most solvable script for heretic, which makes it the most, the least frustrating situation with a heretic in play. So it is very, and it also does a very good job of making the fear of heretic into a thing that makes people play differently too, which is, I think, is a very cool mechanic of heretic. It's not even the fact that the heretic is or is in play and what it does. It is the fear of whether or not the heretic is in play, because you could have a moment where somebody says, let me do the math here. There is probably a heretic in play. Oh, wait. No, the Baron only added one outsider, not two. Guess what? There isn't. You killed yourself for nothing. Good one. So it's definitely interesting. And, we had, I think, a couple scenarios where demons had killed their minions a little bit earlier because they wanted to ensure that they could win if they needed to in the end. So yeah, it's interesting.
One more divisive, but that in quotes, divisive character to ask about. How do you feel about Legion? Both being as Legion or playing against Legion, or generally being on a script where you don't know if Legion's in play.
I think, as you said, that it's another one where they should be few and far between. I think
Absolutely.
the fear of Legion is probably the better tool than the actual Legion game itself. I think the feeling of solving a Legion game as good is much better than winning as Legion as evil, which is the kind of dichotomy of the character, the characters in parentheses S, I guess. It is, you are essentially baffling like 2 to 3 of your friends in a way that seems unfair almost. And so it seems almost like you're bullying somebody when you are a Legion. But at the same time, like, that's kind of the whole point of playing that script, the way, whatever script it is, in the way that it is that if you don't do that every once in a while, then there is no fear of it being a thing. So then you can't really have that be the narrative that you're selling in another game when you're playing as the other type of demon, or in a scenario where it's an atheist with whatever else. I think that's kind of the frustration point with that is, like I said, I feel like it doesn't feel good to win as Legion as much as it does to feel, when you win as any other evil character. I think you feel more accomplished when you win as any other evil character. And I think as good, it does feel good to win against Legion because you feel like you've overcome like a lot. But I do think that it's much harder to do that depending on the setup and how long and all that kind of stuff. I would guess that I don't know if I've played a Legion game in person ever, so that might be a whole different can of worms.
I haven't either, but I've heard Legion shines better in person.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say that probably be something I would like to see. But I would say that of the controversial characters, that's probably the one that I would say is one of my least favorite to really be a part of. But it's not something that I wouldn't play or wouldn't attempt if it's on the script. I just think it's probably the one I understand the most of why it's probably controversial, and kind of somewhat slightly agree that it's kind of frustrating.
Well, one final question. It's not a very serious one, but Nina suggested it, and I thought it was fun. What character would you like to be in real life?
Hmm.
You can go from Sex and Violets or any other character.
It's a good question. Do I say organ grinder and then get immediately arrested? Huh.
The big one, I know.
There's so many to choose from. I guess if I were to like go from real life, I would say mathematician, but that sounds very boring. So I will choose savant so that people would just come up to me and tell me random truths and random lies.
I love it. All right, well, Jen, thank you for joining for this episode of Hard Claim with Viva La Sam.
Thanks for having me.